Welcome to the Motherhood Alliance podcast, the podcast dedicated to empowering moms and families on their health and wellness journey. I'm Brittany Suttner.
And I'm Andrea Rankus. Together, we're here to explore holistic approaches that go beyond conventional medicine.
Each week, we dive into topics that matter most to you, everything from nutrition and mental health to alternative therapies and natural living.
We'll bring you the expert interviews, insightful discussions, and practical tips to make motherhood a little easier and help your family thrive.
Please keep in mind that this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to replace the advice, diagnosis, or treatment plans you have with your personal healthcare team. Please have a conversation with your trusted healthcare provider prior to making any changes or implementing any strategies or advice you learn from this podcast.
Whether you're a new mom navigating the early stages of parenthood or a seasoned pro looking for new ways to support your family's well-being, you're in the right place.
Here at the Motherhood Alliance podcast, we challenge the status quo, ask the tough questions, and offer a supportive community for moms who want to make an informed, holistic choice.
Thank you for joining us on this journey.
Let's get started. Hi, we are Britt and Andrea from motherhoodalliance.com, and we are excited to welcome you to a 4-episode series with Karen Kieffer, a licensed independent clinical social worker and certified transformational nutrition coach who specializes in trauma, PTSD, anxiety, and depression, with a current focus on those who are preparing to become first-time parents. Karen is the owner of Snowfields Coaching and the creator of Embodied Dialogics, an approach designed to help individuals and couples work through childhood trauma before a baby arrives so they're not carrying old patterns into the next generation. Her work is highly individualized and shaped by decades of experience in mental health systems, education, community development, and leadership. What makes Karen's perspective especially powerful is that it's grounded in lived experience. After navigating her own lifelong trauma and later a cancer diagnosis that prompted her to stop postponing the things that mattered most, she returned to school in her 50s to become a clinician and build the kind of support she wished had existed earlier in her life. We're really excited to share Karen's expertise and experience with you. Let's get started with today's conversation.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Motherhood Alliance podcast. We are here with Karen from Snowfields Coaching. We have really enjoyed our conversation, and it's just been really insightful, especially these last couple episodes, just talking about being a parent in today's society and just, dealing with the things that are internal to us and like how to really help our children navigate the world in a way that's going to be helpful for them. So in this episode, we're going to switch gears a little bit. So we're actually going to be talking about psychedelic therapies. First of all, let's talk about how did you come across psychedelic therapies? Has it been something that's been helpful for you? And then let's just talk about what it is.
Let's see. I think it was around 2014. I went to the International Trauma Conference, and there was one scientists presenting papers about MDMA therapy for trauma. And I was like, what?
MDMA. Okay.
Yeah. Ecstasy. So it was like, does not compute. What? How would that possibly impact trauma? And who's allowing somebody to play with that?
Yeah.
And so that just really stuck with me. And I'm a person, I research, so I look at the paper, I look at all the citations of that paper, and I go discover, like, where did this come from? So I followed that for a little while, and it turns out it started becoming very popular, kind of a renaissance of psychedelics from the unregulated 60s to it becoming a controlled illegal substance. Well, many of them. And so it's you think of psychedelics as like having a hippie acid trip or something, but the therapeutic use of them is a very different thing to me. Now, I'm only going to talk about the way I approach this. There are so many other ways that people approach and use and think about psychedelics. There's been an underground movement for a long time because these substances have been illegal. People have been using them still, right? So a lot of that was not, when it's not regulated, you have people who become experts in it, in the safety of it, outside of a legal use, right? So there are a lot of people who are very experienced and know how to create safety around the use. And usually they were used for spiritual, opening up your spiritual whatever. So many uses and religious uses from indigenous communities. I mean, it really came from that whole origin of people and their relationship in their spiritual life with these substances. So I do not come from that, and we all build on that. So I think it's really important to respect that knowledge of it. But as soon as it became like this resurgence, we have people in a lot of pain, very desperate, grabbing onto what can I do to get out of this pain, right? Oh, do ayahuasca. You can resolve all your trauma in this 1-week retreat. And people go and do that. And I think, some people have good results and some people, they spend a lot of money and it does nothing. So, and that's one thing that we're so conditioned to think, oh, if I take this pill, it will do this thing and solve this problem. We're conditioned to think that, right? And so if I do this, I'll have the same result as somebody else. And which is the same in terms of psychiatric medications. People say, oh, you got better. What drug did you take? I'm going to do the same thing. But going back to each individual system is so different. Our emotional development and wiring, but also our physiology. People respond so differently to the same substances in their body, whether that's food, medication, psychedelics, whatever. But when people want to get out of pain, they will try anything. Mm-hmm. And so this is what I feel like I see this being promoted all over even in forums like for mental health issues or any kind of depression, anxiety, there's always going to be someone, try this mushroom, I'll sell it to you or whatever, and it will solve all your problems. You see that all over the place.
So what is your background personally then using psychedelics?
So when I saw the research on this, just like this was the mode I was in, the research, where is this research leading? How can it be practical? So I just started learning about it. And there came to be, I think this was 2020. Well, no, before that I had done some trainings on specifically how to facilitate these ayahuasca things and how to create a space that's safe for whatever's going on with people. And that was the first therapeutic kind of one that I did because when people do these recreationally, they're not going to have the same experience as when it's focused therapeutically.
When you say ayahuasca, what is that?
It's a combination of two plant things developed in South America.
So this is an actual therapy type? It's a psychedelic therapy?
This is a substance people use for many purposes. And, a lot of it has been the spiritual thing or healing in general, so many ways that people kind of conceptualize that. But these psychedelics have been coming in, they're being researched, and so they're coming into the clinical world. And so I'm talking more about those clinical uses rather than the spiritual exploration.
So in your experience in the research you were reading, what types of psychedelics were in that research? Mm-hmm. Is it like the mushroom type things? Is it like the ecstasy type thing? I don't even know what ecstasy is made out of. Are pretty much all of these psychedelics made from different herbs or plants and then changed to give different effects? Can you give us just like an understanding of what type of psychedelics you're talking about and then how are they produced? Yeah, so we have psilocybin mushrooms, magic mushrooms. That's a big one. MDMA, that is a chemical that's produced. So the mushroom is the mushroom. And I think over time, now if it's clinical and approved, it becomes a business. And so they're going to extract and do whatever they do to create a product. So you have MDMA, which is chemically produced. And is that ecstasy? Is that AKA ecstasy? Okay.
I think so.
Okay.
I'm not that street aware of all these things.
Okay.
Some crime show came up and they were talking about a drug, and I'm like, I don't know what that is, and it turned out to be something I'm very familiar with, but
just a different name.
So MDMA and psilocybin were kind of the two big ones that had a lot of research. People are researching LSD. They're researching a bunch of other ones as well that cause the same kind of openness to change is what it really does, and including cannabis. So So I learned about ayahuasca. It wasn't something I was interested in doing, but it was the first thing that came to my attention as being available to explore these things, plant medicine. And then I did another one that was more clinically oriented towards ketamine. So that's also another one, that's horse tranquilizer or whatever that you can go buy at the Tractor Supply store, apparently.
Yeah, you can. I believe it's available.
Yeah. But that is now, that's been researched a lot, and that's like one of the therapies that's starting to be paid for by insurance because it's very medical based. It's not some of these other things that are harder to research the impacts and effects. It was something that the drug itself was already approved for clinical uses, and it's something that a doctor or a nurse, somebody who prescribes drugs, can just set up a clinic and inject this without any kind of actual therapy.
So I guess a question I have too is like with all of these different options, and you had mentioned like generally speaking, the point of them is to help with openness to change. Mm-hmm. Is that the purpose of these psychedelic therapies?
And is that openness to change releasing trauma?
How does it work with therapy, just helping people?
Why do these?
Yeah.
That's something they're still researching, and there's some good research on that I'll give you some citations. People can look up the actual research on some of this stuff. But the idea is there's something in your brain called the default mode network. You can go look up these things and learn for yourself. But psychedelics interfere with this. And so it takes away some of these patterns and stories in your nervous system and allows your system, not you consciously, but your system to consider something different. So I think the moment that you're using these substances and having this altered experience is really important. It's also important what you do with that and what you do with it afterwards to consolidate change in a certain direction. And so and you said something about releasing trauma. I don't think that's a thing because trauma is something your nervous system learned. Your nervous system has to learn something else and unlearn that. So that's a process that doesn't happen overnight. It's not like you can just release it. Although what the psychedelics do is speed up that ability to make those physiological shifts that are the foundation of learning and creating patterns. It allows them to change quicker. So that's how I see it.
Gotcha.
Okay, so if I'm understanding this correctly, if somebody were to supervised use some of these psychedelics, it would allow them to be more open to different concepts and learning new patterns. And so then after that experience, it wouldn't just be during the experience that they would find relief. It would be something where, like working with someone like you or someone else, they would have an openness during the experience, and then that could be carried into future life through strategy of therapy?
Yes, and I would say that the experience is not relief. It is not comfortable. Mostly things that are really valuable are very uncomfortable, even scary. And so that's what for a recreational thing, you might call a bad trip. So things quiet down in other places and all this other stuff comes up into your awareness because you don't have things stopping them anymore. It can be terrifying.
I was going to say, and sitting with somebody who can help supervise or help keep it in safety, like if these bad things are not bad necessarily, but sometimes bad things are popping up that you're not like ready to deal with, that therapist or whoever can really help them work through it, I feel like a little bit better.
So you're not cognitively processing this stuff. This is like body stuff. You're just having emotions and dreams and visions, and you're not analyzing in the moment. You are living it. So if at times when I used to sit with people, my job was to make sure they were physically safe, they were psychologically as safe as in my power, just make sure they didn't leave, they didn't do anything that would harm themselves. So, because I think that's, when you lose control, you don't know what you're going to do necessarily. And just having someone there helps your system know, okay, this isn't like death or whatever.
Yeah, you're in a safe spot. Yeah.
Yeah.
If someone is exploring these, and I know that that you've shared with us that you really help them understand if this is something that would fit them or not. So how would you help determine, or what types of signs or symptoms or history, like what would determine that this would be a good fit for someone?
So first of all, in terms of if I work with somebody in that way, which since I now live in Wisconsin, my license is not in Wisconsin, and these things are not legal in Wisconsin, I don't do this kind of work anymore here because, that I can't do that. But if somebody's going to do it themselves, I can support them. I can't do it and be there with them. So first of all, people, they have to tell their doctor and make sure there's no medical things that they need to be aware of. I can't evaluate that, and it's really important. Second, I have people consult with a pharmacist who is an expert in these things to make sure that if they're taking any medications, that it won't interact with whatever they're planning to do. And also, if they really want to do this, let's say they're on an antidepressant. Oh, it's not working for me. Okay, will you consult with this person? Are you going to go off that? If you're going to do this, you can't be doing that. So there will be advice from somebody like that. You need to go off this. It'll take this amount of time before you could try that. So I have no opinion on those things. That is not my expertise. But I make sure that someone consults with somebody like that first because, and it's heartbreaking that sometimes people are seeking this relief and healing and it makes them worse. It's risky. We don't know exactly how it's going to hit an individual person. There's no guarantee that it's going to help you. It could make people worse. And so trying to minimize that is important.
These are becoming more popular, though, so that it must be helping a certain amount of the population.
Yes, and there are that many people who are just desperate to try anything. So, trying to help people balance that. This is not the golden pill that will fix you, right? And sometimes healing and processing these things, you often feel worse first because you're aware in contact with the stuff. You're not protecting it yourself from it anymore. You're working with it. You often feel worse when you're in the middle of things.
Is this something where if somebody wanted to try this and they're getting permission from their doctor and they're following the process, they would have an experience and then there would be some therapy after, and then they would do it again? Is this a multi-frequency thing? Is this a one-time thing? Does it really depend on the type of...
It does. All these different drugs have different actions and mechanisms, and I think there's a sequence to them, ideally. I worked with people with cannabis first. And even with people who smoke it all the time recreationally or whatever to help their anxiety, this process is different because in this particular kind of therapy that I was trained in, you are working with that person while they're in the altered state. And that is a totally different experience, even if you're familiar with that substance in a different context. It's different. But cannabis is one of the things that really kind of lays bare your nervous system in the beginning in such a helpful way. So, and we can see what's going on and people really process big things and it feels terrible. Feels terrible, but you process it because we're avoiding this processing these terrible things that have happened. That's how we survive, is we block them out. But they stay there and they keep messing us up underneath everything. So processing this in a physical, somatic way feels terrible in your nervous system because you've been avoiding exactly this feeling. But then you bite off a chunk of that thing and then that's gone. So in terms of releasing, I think of it more as metabolizing these difficult emotions that you've been holding in. So the two that I have experience in, I've been trained in MDMA, ketamine, and supporting all these different things. But the ones I've worked with are the psilocybin mushrooms and cannabis. And those are two very different things. Cannabis, I worked with people 12 weeks once a week for 90 minutes a time. And for the mushrooms, it was once every 6 months, maybe. So because that's a much bigger immediate effect. And for me, when I was studying this, the research for psilocybin mushrooms is strongest to help people deal with a terminal diagnosis. This was before I had gotten diagnosed. But so a nurse friend of mine, we were going to work with families who were having, a person with a terminal illness, and they're all like trying to deal with this and work with the families and support that process. And I forget all the reasons why we couldn't do it. But then I was diagnosed with cancer. And that, it's one dose of the mushrooms transforms people's relationship to, looking at the end of their life. It's fascinating. It's really strong research. So I went for the things that have the strongest research base and that were practical for me. And so those two things I have done myself, and they have helped me. And I do think it's one of the reasons why I can move forward in my life with this cancer diagnosis. And I think I mentioned these have been some of the best years of my life because I'm not stuck in this fear mode about that.
You have so much background, like we shared about in episode 1, of just different career fields, but then now you are a social worker. Like, you have a lot of therapy background, you have leadership background, you have all of these other tools in your tool belt, but you really feel like those experiences of these psychedelic therapies helped push beyond what general therapy or your other tools could have.
Right. Because, I talk about the nervous system, and we know some things about it. We know some basics of how it operates. It is so sophisticated. There's so much going on in human beings that we do not understand. And so the psychedelics are acting on this in some way. I could never explain it. And there's some research on how each one kind of affects the brain and what's happening in that moment and why the effects last. There's some good research happening on this. But so much of it is unknown because we are so complex as beings. We're not complicated. We are complex. We will never understand it all.
I'm just purely curious. Would you be able to share a little bit about your experience with the mushroom one?
So my personal experience after having done it, I don't know, several times, it was terrible. Really horrible, hard, difficult, scary things until the last one. I think the last time I did it was like 2 years ago, and that was a totally different thing. So all of those really difficult experiences, I processed important things, even if I don't remember what they were. I mean, it's kind of like being in a dream. It can be scary, it can be disorienting, and there's some visual things that you see in certain stages of the trajectory of that, colors and kaleidoscopes and all the trippy, psychedelic art that you see. That can be part of your experience, or it can just be terrible, horrible, horror, fear feeling.
But did you have like a trained therapist alongside you? And you said some of these, somebody would just sit with you and make sure you're safe, but some of these they can actually kind of help guide your experience. Was that your experience with this? Did you have any like guidance or a therapist there with you or anything?
I didn't do that. I think because I had a lot of background, I'd done a bunch of work, that I wouldn't recommend that for most people. And I certainly wouldn't recommend doing them and going out and into the forest and having a wonderful time and listening to music like that. That's not what this process is. And I think the therapeutic mode, what they call in psychedelics, the set and setting of the context that you're doing the substance in, matters for what kind of experience you have. So if you're out with friends and you're in the forest, and it can be very pleasant, these things aren't necessarily going to come up. They might, right? And that would be the bad trip. But in a therapeutic way, you are confining your focus and your sensory stimuli to be internally focused. And that's where the stuff is.
You came in there with a purpose.
Exactly.
And so that's where you're going to go.
Exactly.
Especially with you knowing that some ugly things are probably going to come up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And before, working with the psilocybin mushrooms, I had worked with the cannabis. So I had a feeling of what my system was like. And so I felt okay doing that. I'm not sure it's a great idea. You don't know, anybody could have some kind of medical issue or whatever. It's good to have eyes on you. So, but the last one that I did was amazing. And it was wonderful and beautiful and just amazing. I'll never forget the feeling.
Did that symbolize that you had like a breakthrough? Maybe.
Maybe. Yeah, but I think it reflects my underlying nervous system. So this was after I'd been through some cancer treatment. I'd had all these friends and family, people I hadn't heard of for a million years, all rally around me and support me. And that's what I felt in this particular experience, like the circle of people around me, layers and layers of faces of just pure love and supporting me.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And being able to rest in that and accept it and really feel it, it was amazing. And I think, if you're diagnosed with cancer tomorrow, everyone is going to feel that towards you. They're going to want to be there and support you. They don't know how, right? They don't know what they can do. They can't solve your problem, but they're emotionally with you. And I just really felt that. It was really clear. That feeling has stuck with me, and that realization. I mean, that about people, but like the really deep feeling of it has really stuck with me.
I think where I still get confused is if somebody is stepping into trying one of these, you're sharing that you don't really know what type of experience they're going to have. But we're also talking about nervous system and some science behind this as well. And so if somebody is like you said, somebody who has a recent diagnosis or something really heavy, is their experience likely tied to the health of their nervous system and the underlying traumas and like the underlying state of themselves? Or is it completely unrelated? If somebody who has a very balanced nervous system and is overall, not stressed and then they try these, could they have an awful experience? Are these correlated at all?
I think so. But humans have an amazing superpower of suppressing things. And so you could feel fine, appear to everyone like you're fine, you're regulated and well-adjusted on all that, and something could come out of the blue that your system has suppressed for whatever reason. Or, there's a whole spiritual dimension to this, that whole part of humans that, is a mystery. We can feel things that are in the world, too, that aren't us personally. We could have a horrible experience, like thinking about the fate of the world right now. If anybody let themselves go into that very far, that can overwhelm us. And it's not anything personal that ever, happened in our individual lives. So I think it's not just that. And I think it depends. It interacts with your beliefs and experiences in those realms as well of what your experience is going to be. So I think it's really unpredictable. And the more support and knowledge you have going into it, the better you'll be prepared and not be surprised about a really difficult experience that could be the most productive thing that ever happened to you, Yeah. And I think going in, if it's going to be difficult and you want healing, you want it to be difficult. And it takes courage to walk into that.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And
so
preparation.
Interesting. Wow, this is definitely a whole new realm. So when you were helping with this and providing support in this is when you lived in Massachusetts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's very interesting to me to hear about these things being used in a controlled fashion.
Right.
I have zero education on it. So thanks for giving us a little bit of insight and sharing your experience with us. Thank you for all 4 of these episodes and sharing your story in episode 1, and just your passion for these parents to be in our, in our last 2 episodes as well. And then this was definitely a little out of this world.
A little trippy.
This episode was. And then also I will thank you in advance because I know you're going to share some resources that we can put in the show notes so people can do some more reading and education on this. Yep. So that's awesome. Karen, what's the best way to get in contact with you? Is it just heading to the show notes and clicking on your booking link and having a free consult if someone just wants to continue any of these conversations with you? They can also go to the Motherhood Alliance profile, but you're also starting an Instagram.
Yep.
Okay. What is your handle on Instagram?
It's Snowfields Coaching.
Okay. And then do you have an email address as well?
I do. It is yes, YES, at snowfieldscoaching.com.
Perfect. Thank you, Karen, for sharing your experience and your insight in these episodes. We really enjoyed them.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider leaving a rating or review or sharing it directly with a friend who could benefit from the information? We know that you're a busy mom or caregiver, and our goal is to make your life easier by bringing tips and tricks directly from experts into your earbuds. By sharing this episode with someone you love, you can play a critical role in helping to make their life easier as well. We appreciate your time and thank you for being a part of the Motherhood Alliance family.